بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. To proceed, Ikhwan and Akhawat, respected teachers, ulama, I greet you with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Come on, asshole. Balasi. That's the only hardly much Bengali I know. It's good to be back in East London. I haven't been here for quite a while, so Jazakallah for inviting me. Ikhwan and Akhawat, brothers and sisters, today we're going to be talking about an important topic. And inshallah, this topic is going to be on the Quran itself. We know the Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Kitabullah, is our foundation, is our basis for our whole entire life. It is the glasses that we wear to see the world. This is the book, this is the tradition, this is the foundation that colors our life, that gives vision to our life. Without the Quran, we have nothing. Without wahi, without revelation, without the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are nothing. And the reason I'm saying this, because this relates to the death of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when in a hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that his death is the biggest fitna. If you feel sad, you're depressed, you're going through torture, think of my death, referring to the Prophet himself, which is worse than anything, because the direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you like, was severed, was cut off. And from this perspective, without the Quran, we have nothing. We don't have any connection with our purpose, with our tradition, with our raison d'etre, with our reason for existence. We don't have anything if we don't have the Quran. So, I want to give you some nasiha. As we know, the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he said, "Ad-deenu nasiha," the deen is sincerity, the deen is sincere advice. So inshallah ta'ala, I hope to talk a few words, speak about a few words coming from the heart and penetrating your hearts, inshallah. As the scholars do say, if you speak with the brain, it goes through the brain, it goes through the ears. If you speak with the heart, it goes straight to the hearts, inshallah. So let's talk about the Quran. Obviously, speaking about the Quran requires months and maybe years, and obviously you are far more learned than I am with regards to this topic. But I want to address this from a perspective of someone living in the 21st century. And I want you first to realize, before we talk about the Quran, a timeless book, because this is the topic of today, the Quran, a timeless book, let's talk about how it has affected our history. And the reason I want to talk about how it's affected our history, because if we break the link between ourselves, our community and our history, we break the link to our izzah, to our honor, to our dignity, to our confidence. As Malcolm X once said, the way the Americans destroyed the black people was by making them forget their own history. And this way, if we remember, reflect and ponder upon the history of the Muslims and of how the Quran changed the world, how the Quran was the paradigm shift, everything was turned on its head. Things changed when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, "Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq." Read, recite, proclaim in the name of your Lord who created. These first few words created the milestone that changed everything. History changed, politics changed, economics changed, society changed, religion changed, our concept of Allah Azza wa Jal changed, our connection with Him changed, everything changed from that moment. This is why the Western historian Karen Armstrong, she says, if it wasn't for the words of the Quran, Islam would have not taken root. So let's see how the Quran affected our past and our history. And let's start with technology. Who has an iPhone? Many of you, many sisters have an iPhone as well, I bet. You may have an iPad, a computer, a telephone, some kind of system, whether it's in your car, whether it's in your phone, whether it's in your keys, whether it's anything that you use that has technology. This is as a result of the Quran. And you may think, what is Hamza talking about? Well, listen to me very carefully. Adam Smith, he's the very funny looking guy behind the Queen's head on your 20-pound note. Adam Smith was the 18th century founder of modern capitalism. You know that big disease that we have in the West at the moment, capitalism? He was the modern founder of capitalism. He said in one of his letters that if it wasn't for the tranquil government of the empire of the caliphs, the Khalifa, Islam, Islamic governance as per the Quran and Sunnah, if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't have the inquiry into the interconnecting principles of nature. And this is so true, because when we crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, when we went to the Iberian Peninsula, when the Muslims, they knew what Islam was about, they didn't stay at home, they went across the world. When they went to Spain, and they implemented aspects of the Quran and Sunnah, the tranquil government, the tolerance, the justice of Islam, it facilitated the Jews, Muslims and Christians to come together to inquire into the principles of nature, into man life in the universe, to look into the sciences. This is what Adam Smith was saying. The empire of the caliphs produced this because it's as a result of the Quran. Because we know, for instance, the Quran says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Indeed, unquestionably, Allah loves the just. We know the Prophet ﷺ said in a mutawatir hadith that whoever harms a non-Muslim under our protection harms the Prophet himself. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the book itself, the Quran, is a book that makes you think and reflect. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves do they not see? أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect within themselves? أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Have you not seen the camel and how it was created? وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus to explain our signs in detail for those who reflect. So the Quran is a book of thinking and reflection. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not use your brains? Do you not use your reasoning skills? So when this was implemented on a social political level in our society such as Spain, what happened? You had the likes of Musa bin Maymun. Musa bin Maymun was a Jewish scholar. The Jewish people called him the second Moses. That's how important he was. He wrote many works in the Arabic language. We had many manuscripts on astronomy, physics, mathematics, geology, geography, history, poetry, literary studies. And this was the basis for the scientific revolution. Why? Because when the Christians overtook Toledo again, you've heard of the Inquisition, you heard of the Christian tyranny from that perspective. When they took Toledo again, many of the European scholars, they traveled to Toledo and they picked up manuscripts. Ikhwan and Akhawat, brothers and sisters, they picked up manuscripts on science, on mathematics, and from there they developed the algorithm. And without the algorithm, you can't have a computer, you can't have an iPhone, you can't have a car, you can't have anything with technology that requires a computerized system. So as a result of Allah, because He revealed the Quran and Sunnah that was implemented in Spain, that created the environment to look into these things, if it wasn't for Allah, you would not have the iPhone. Go to the Apple store and tell them outside the Apple store you must have Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You must have those words. And tell them why. Because it's of the Quran that you have the algorithm, because we created an environment that produced the people that would search into these things. Not the tyranny of the Christians at the time. Because even a Jewish historian, Zion Zohar, what does he say? He says, thus when the Muslims crossed the Straits of Gibraltar in the Iberian Peninsula, the Jews saw the Muslims as liberators from Christian persecution. Allahu Akbar. This was the reality of Islam. This is our history. So go outside Comet, go outside PC World and tell them, demand and say, thank Allah Azza wa Jal. Even if you don't believe in Him, because of the concept of Allah and because of His revelation, He created all of these things. This is why Professor Thomas Arnold, not Professor Abdullah Hakim, but Professor Thomas Arnold, not a Mufti or a Mullah, but a Westerner, he says that if it wasn't for Islamic Spain, we would not have the Renaissance and we would not have the scientific revolution. The Quran created Western civilization. The academics know this. The Sun News doesn't, Sky News doesn't, BBC doesn't, but it's our job to teach them. So that's the first point in history, how the Quran changed the world. Scientific revolution. Second point, the presumption of innocence. Any of you, if you were caught in school with some weed, or you were being very naughty, and you're taken to prison, or you're taken to the court, you know in this country in the West, you have the presumption of innocence. You assumed innocent before you're guilty, unless you're in Guantanamo, of course. May Allah free our brothers and sisters. So, we know that you assumed innocent. This principle, that's the most important legal maxim in Western civilization, came from where? The Quran and the Sunnah. Trust me, you don't know this, but you need to learn your history so you can be proud. Not in an arrogant way, but you know that the deen of Allah changed the world. And let me tell you why. King Louis the IX, he traveled to the east and he met a monk. And this monk, he was researching into the Quran and the prophetic traditions. And he advised, and there was a conversation according to one of the chroniclers. There was a conversation between King Louis the IX and this monk. And the monk said, if you want success, implement justice like these people implement justice. The book talks about justice. And he quoted some verses or some lines that are exact copy of a hadith in Bukhari. The monk did this. And King Louis was inspired. He went back to Europe, back to France, and he implemented in Europe the most important legal maxim ever, which is the presumption of innocence. And we know this resonates in the statements of the Khulafa, in the statements of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, in his famous letter to the judges. So King Louis IX was inspired by the monk that was inspired by the hadith. And we know the hadith is revelation as well. And without the Quran there is no hadith. So you may think Hamza Zozis is making this up. He's taking it from left field, pulling out from the skies. No, I'm not. And listen to me carefully. There is a 1980s academic article by Marcel Boissard. It's called On the Probable Influence of Islam on the Presumption of Innocence. It's in there. Read it, the whole narrative. Take it from the chronicler between King Louis and the monk. And they had this conversation and they inspired King Louis to implement this principle that was taken, stolen from the hadith. Allahu Akbar. So the Quran changed the world in regards to the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, and the Quran changed the world in regards to the most important legal maxim, the presumption of innocence. Let me give you the third one. Tolerance. We're in Britain. They invite you economic migrants over. They take care of you. They say, come. Ahlan wa sahlan. Come and do all the jobs for us. And then they complain and say, you guys are immigrants now, you need to go back home. This is our home. This is our home. And the very fact that we have this so-called tolerance in Britain is as a result of Islam and the Quran. Now you may think, what is he talking about? There's a conspiracy going on. Science, justice, tolerance, all because of Islam? Yes, and be proud of it. This is our history, ikhwan and akhawat, brothers and sisters. For instance, John Locke was a very famous post-Enlightenment thinker. He wrote books, for example, on the treaties of tolerance. He also wrote the book on civil governance. And he directly inspired the founding fathers of America when they talked about tolerance and justice. And he inspired Europe and especially Britain. John Locke himself. And John Locke writes that he was only influenced and inspired by one man. And this man was called Edward Pocock. Edward Pocock was called the first Orientalist. He traveled to Palestine or to the East. He took Islamic manuscripts. He went back to Oxford and he used to teach Islamic studies. And John Locke sat with Edward Pocock. And he was directly influenced. And we could prove this because many of the works of the treatises on tolerance are inspired by Islam, because we had the likes of Imam al-Qarhafi, I believe it was the 15th or 16th century. Imam, who wrote about treatises on tolerance, talked about taking care of the dhimmi, the ahl al-dhimma, the people of the book, to take care of them with regards to their rights, physical and psychological rights. And I would argue that Edward Pocock took these manuscripts and started teaching people about the treaties on tolerance and governance between different peoples. And this is why John Locke, in his book on civil governance, do you know how he describes the relationship between the king or the ruler and his people? Do you know what word he uses? Vicegerency. Translate that in Arabic. Khalifa. He took the cause of the Khalifa and put it in his books and influenced the words with regards to the treaties of tolerance. Allahu Akbar. And you can read Christopher J. Walker's book on this issue, Western Historians. So look how the Quran changed the world, ikhwan and akhawat. Politics, justice, science and progress. The things that they accuse the Muslims of lagging behind. I'm telling you, they are biting the hand that feeds them, as they say in Britain. We, the Muslims, gave them this tradition. We inspired them. And the reason we're in this mess is because we don't have the Quran or Sunnah in our countries. We don't have the civilization of Islam. Take Bangladesh for example. We have that. Even to call her by animal's name would be being bad to the animal. Wallahi, I'm not ashamed to say this. Hasina, whatever her name is, she's not allowing the poor Burmese brothers and sisters that are being oppressed and burnt, not allowing them through the borders to Bangladesh to take care of the brothers and sisters. She's to blame and she'll be accountable. Take most of the Muslim countries, do they have the Quran and Sunnah in place? No, and this is our situation. It's not because of Islam, it's because of the absence of Islam. And Islam is the only civilization that falls when you move away from its doctrine. But capitalism is the only civilization that progresses when it moves away from its own doctrine. You've seen that they've broken the principles and made new ones all the time. Like they make their God in the morning and they eat him in the evening. Just like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was talking about his jahiliyyah, he wanted something to worship. And then he made a God of dates. And then he got hungry, then he ate his God. Eating his arm, sorry, I have to eat your arm, God. Eat his foot. And this is what they do with capitalism. They create a model, a framework. Then after when something goes wrong, they have to break their own principles to preserve them. Then you know they're going wrong. They know they're making up as they go along. They make their God in the morning, their deity in the morning, and they eat him in the evening. But Islam is the only civilization that to continue the progress, you have to keep it going closer to its doctrine, closer to its principles, closer to its foundation, which is the Quran and Sunnah. So, as we see from history, the Quran is a timeless book because it changed politics, treaties on tolerance. It changed progress, Renaissance, scientific revolution, and it changed justice, the presumption of innocence. You knowing this is enough. Because many of us don't even know how the Quran shaped the world from this perspective. Shaped the entire globe, the entire civilization. So we should go outside the courthouse and say, right outside the courthouse, not Her Majesty's court, say, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Because He gave you the presumption of innocence. He inspired you with the presumption of innocence directly from the Quran and Sunnah. Also education. We talked about Toledo. Well, there were two English scholars, Daniel of Morley and Adalad of Bath. They travelled to Spain and they took manuscripts. Where did they go? Ikhwan and Akhawat. Oxford. And what did they create? The first institution that was then to be called Oxford University. Every Muslim should go there for free, even with failed A-levels, because our heritage allowed Oxford to be what Oxford is today. Adalad of Bath and Daniel of Morley, they travelled to Oxford with their Islamic manuscripts and created that institution. So demand a place. Right after your failed A-levels, when you're going to get them in August 17th, I believe. Write and say, on your letter or your email or your personal statement, I demand my right to be in Oxford University because you have not thanked Allah and Islam and the Muslims for the emergence of this institution. Because Adalad of Bath, Daniel of Morley, that influenced this institution was directly influenced by Islamic Spain, which Islamic Spain was directly influenced by the Quran and Sunnah. Go, Ikhwan, Khawat, Oxford, your place. That should be the new Whitechapel, yeah? So there, how the Quran influenced mankind. So let's talk about now, how can the Quran, how is it now a timeless book, a timeless miracle? Well, first and foremost, it's a timeless miracle because this Quran has told us to go and speak to people about our amazing tradition. Ud'u ila sabili rabbik. Call to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Call to His path. Allah tells us, He's inspiring us timelessly to go and have another life, life upon life. Because calling to His way is the best thing to do. It's the job of the prophets, and you get the reward of the prophets. And Allah says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbik." There's an amr, there's a command form here. Call to the sabil of Allah. Wake up and be people. Don't be a 9-to-5 Muslim. 9 to 5 a Muslim, you work in the factories in an office, you get married, you have your kids, and then you die. That's an animal, it's an animal's existence. You just run by your instincts. 9 to 5, survival instincts. Having kids, the procreation instinct. Then you die. But Allah is calling to you something that gives you more life. It adds life upon life. Responding to His call. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِرُسُولِهِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. O you who believe, respond to the call of Allah and His message, that which gives you life. يُحْيِيكُمْ. Imam Bukhari said, responding to the call is responding to all that is good. And we know Ibn Kathir in his tafsir, good, khayr, means the whole of Islam comprehensively. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is timelessly calling you to something which gives you life, which is to call people to this tradition, to revive them, to take them out of the darkness into the light. Because it will help you to go to Jannah, ikhwan and akhawat. As Allah says in the Quran, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Let there rise amongst a band of people that will call to the good, the khayr. That means the whole of Islam comprehensively, according to Ibn Kathir. They command the ma'roof, they forbid the munkar, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they will attain success. Qurtubi said, success here is those who attain Jannah. So Allah is calling you timelessly to Jannah by telling you to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that which gives us life. And we know that this is the case of the Sahaba. And the reason we're Muslim today is because of them. And this is why we should stop concentrating on buildings and statues and minarets. Wallahi, Islam the mosque is just opposite this building. It is a shame that we have minarets and domes. It is a shame. Wallahi, look at me. Wallahi, it is a shame. We have minarets and domes. We spend thousands of pounds on pestle and mortar, on cement. How dare we? If the Prophet ﷺ was given a choice of a minaret or a dome, which by the way was not even Islamic at the time. Look at the Prophet's masjid. There was no dome or minaret. If he was given the choice of spending money on bricks and mortar, or spending money fi sabilillah, what choice would he make? Tell me. Be brave, people. What choice would he make? Wallahi, I believe Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would make the choice of spending the money fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, for struggling his cause, for da'wah. Not for buildings. These were actually a progressive innovation centuries after Islam. How dare we spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a dome, on a minaret, when they wouldn't even spend that on the Prophet's masjids in the time of the Salaf, in the time of the pious predecessors. Wallahi, 90 years after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, 90 years after his death, where were we? We were in Spain. We were in Multan, in Pakistan, we were in Spain, we took up 1/3 of the world. And it was 92 years after his death, 92 years, that they decided to renovate the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. It was still leaking with water. 90 years after his death. And we think we have a right to buildings like this. But what about the beloved masjid of the Prophet ﷺ? It was still leaking of water when we were in Spain and we were in Multan. What does this mean? It means our early pious predecessors knew that da'wah was far more important than buildings. You can have the best buildings, if you don't have the right people, it doesn't mean nothing. But you know what I'm trying to say? The point is not the building, it's the people. We have, according to Ilm al-Rijal, the sciences of people, we have 10,000 Sahaba in books, their life, detailed. But we know there are probably more than 100,000 Sahaba. And many of them didn't die, they lived in Mecca and Medina, and many of them didn't die in Mecca and Medina, they died outside. Because they knew Allah was calling them timelessly to Jannah by calling people to Islam. So that's the first way the Quran is timeless. We talked about the history, how it influenced the West, progress, renaissance, scientific revolution, justice, the presumption of innocence, treaties of tolerance, all from the Quran. But now there is a timeless call that Allah Azza wa Jal is calling you to that which gives you life, as we mentioned. Yuhyikum, to give you life. Also, ikhwan and akhawat, we have to understand this. Think about the Sahaba. And we're doing it the contemporary way. Say we travel to Oldham now. Oldham is near Manchester. We go to a village in Oldham with 50 people, 100 people, no money on the dole, no technology, iPads, no weaponry, nothing, rags, in a British contemporary context. And then you give them a book, and they take this book, and within 23 years, they take 1/3 of the world. They take 1/3 of Europe. They take the whole of Europe. Would you believe such a thing? You say this is a miracle, this is impossible. How do you take these stupid people, backward people, Gora? What do they know? They just have their fish and chips, they're unemployed, they don't have any weaponry or any kind of resources. But you give them a message, and then they stand up, they revive themselves and take over the whole of Europe. If I said this could happen, you probably think this guy is crazy. Well, this is what Caroline Hillenbrand, a famous academic historian, she says, I cannot explain how the people of Arabia, the Quraysh, the Arabs, in the state they were in, after one book they took 1/3 of the world. I can't explain this historically, naturally, even from an anthropological perspective. We cannot explain this, Caroline Hillenbrand. And the Sahaba did this because of the message of Islam, Tawheed. Let's go to the second point, how the Quran is timeless. The Quran is timeless because it creates people that advocate the message we spoke about in the first point. And this is the most important point, because the Quran fundamentally, if you look at any of the mufassirun, the tafasir, the exegesis of Islam, of the Quran, you will see they would say the primary goal of the Quran is to speak about Tawheed, affirming the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, affirming His oneness, proclaiming His oneness, worshipping Allah. And this is the Quran, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this message shouldn't be academic. It shouldn't be, okay, what do we understand of uluhiyyah, rububiyyah, His names and attributes, all the categories of Tawheed, fine, that's academia. But what does Tawheed mean here? How is the Quran supposed to make us be revived in our hearts? Is by internalizing Tawheed and really understanding Allah is not a concept, He is a reality. And understanding that Allah's oneness is something that revives us, is something that could make us take over the whole world because of understanding what Tawheed really means. Take, for example, the Quranic statement and the statement that can be found in the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For instance, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. What does this mean? Many of you could probably do the grammatical analysis on the statement. That's not the point. The point is, what does it mean here in your heart? What does it mean here? How have we internalized Tawheed? Because Tawheed, from this perspective, is saying there is no true power apart from the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no might apart from His might. There is no power apart from His power. He is the source of all power. So upon internalizing this, what does it mean? It means we're not victims anymore. It means we do not fall for the victimhood trap. We do not blame others for our situation. We don't say it's the Zionist fault, or it's the American regime, or it's the neo-colonialist power. We don't point the finger. Because once you give blame to others, you're giving them the power. You give them the power for change. You don't give the power to yourself for change. You don't give the power. In our camp, you think there are two unchangeable camps. One that belongs to the people who are oppressing us, and one that belongs to us. And we have no power, they have all the power. It's binary, it's black and white. But this is false. This is not the reality of the Sunnah, to be a victim. This is not the reality of the Sahaba, to be victims. This is not the reality of the Quran and Sunnah. This is not the reality of Tawheed. Because internalizing Tawheed, we realize, Ikhwan and Akhawat, that there is no true power apart from the power of Allah. So it's not the Zionist fault anymore. These things like the Zionists, or an obstacle, or EDL, or Joe Blogs, or whatever the case may be, or Sky News, or Fox News, they're just tools that Allah uses to bring about His will and His power. These are just tools. So in reality, there is no intrinsic power. You can't blame them, blame Allah. It's from Allah. Allah is the source of these things. How dare we attribute these things power? That's almost being a mushrik. That's what an atheist does. The natural world has intrinsic power. This is why Dr. Jafar Idris said the atheists are mushriks by definition, because they attribute power to the creative world. But we know that it doesn't have true power. Intrinsic power belongs to Allah. So from this perspective, it should empower us to be the people, like we mentioned in the first point, to take over the world and show them the justice and mercy and rahmah of Islam. And we can only do this if we internalize what Tawheed really means. And from this perspective, when we go and try and achieve something, we can't blame others and say they're an obstacle. Rather, we know these are the things that Allah has used to manifest His will and power. And I ask you the question, do you know Allah's will? Do you know Allah's will? Of course you don't. So therefore, that means it gives you a whole new realm of possibility to do what you can and try your best. This is why Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, before he was managing the armies, he would be making dua to Allah so much and raising his hands. And he'd be crying. And people would see him and think, this person's going to lose the battle. He's relying so much on Allah. He's finished, he has no power himself. But when he was on the battlefield, what did he do? They saw him and they said, this man doesn't need anybody else apart from his own self. And this is what Tawheed does, ikhwan and akhawat. You realize all power, all will is from Allah Azza wa Jal. If the whole army of the enemies were to come and try to afflict harm on you, they could not afflict harm on you unless it's the will of Allah. This is a profound Quranic statement. No harm can befall you, no good can befall you, unless it's from the will of Allah. This is such a simple, profound concept. If we learn to internalize it, we'll be so brave like the Sahaba were. And we need brave people. People need to call all of you crazy Majnoon, because they called the Sahaba and the Prophet Majnoon. Because what made them tick, what made them drive, was the real driving force of Tawheed. That they can achieve anything in their life in accordance to the will and power of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And nothing else stops them. They don't think, use hikmah. Don't worry, we're weak now. The kuffar are powerful. The Zionists are too strong. Close your mouth. Is this the reality of Tawheed? We're attributing power to these people. But the power only belongs to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we should walk into the marketplace of the world, the dunya, and be proud in a positive way about our deen, and call people with bravery, but with rahmah, with compassion, with hikmah, which means Quran and Sunnah, by the way. And be those distinct characters that when people look at you, they're like, what makes him tick? He's not afraid of anybody apart from Allah. He's so confident. He can achieve anything because he knows that only Allah wills, not human beings will anything. He knows that Joe Bloggs and the Zionists and whoever he points the finger at, they don't have no true power. Allah has the true power. If that's the case, do what you can and try your best, and Allah is with you. This is the effect of Tawheed, ikhwan and akhawat. Something we need to internalize. So that's the second point. The third point, the Quran is timeless because it has the intellectual timeless miracle. As we discussed, the Quran not only makes you think, but it challenges mankind intellectually. Allah says in the Quran, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you're in doubt about this book, which we have sent down to our servant, referring to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then bring one chapter like it, one surah like it, besides Allah, if indeed you are truthful in your claim. If you're truthful that you think this book is from other than Allah, and we know according to the Mufassirun, like you see the Tafsir of Jalalayn, Al-Qurtubi, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Kathir, Razi, many others, you see that there is an ijma'ah that this challenge has something to do with the special language, nature, feature of the Quran. And the Quran came 1400 years ago to challenge the best people who were able to challenge people in Arabic. Because we know at the time, in the 7th century Arabia, language was everything for them. This is why Ibn Rashid, the Islamic Arabian historian, he says the Arabs of the time used to celebrate on two things. Number one, when a boy was born. Number two, when a poet rose amongst them. Poetry was everything for them. And the Quran challenges people who are best placed to challenge the Quran, but they failed. This is why Professor Arbuthnot, a British translator and Orientalist, he says, although several attempts have been made to challenge the Quran, none have yet succeeded. None. It is no wonder Walid ibn al-Mughira, the famous poet of the time, he wanted to become Muslim because he knew this was revelation from Allah, but he didn't because of a promise that he was given from someone that he would be saved from the fire, which obviously was not true. The Quran came and rebuked him. Walid ibn al-Mughira was the famous linguist of the time, and he said, by Allah, this cannot come from a human being. I am the best in poetry and prose, this is not from a human being. So the Quran to this day has challenged positively, timelessly. It's an eternal challenge. Has positively challenged mankind. And mankind have failed to meet this challenge, to bring a recital like the Quran. Its unique literary form. It's a unique fusion of prose and poetry. As A.J. Aubrey, the famous Orientalist and translator of the Quran, said in his introduction to the Quran, that the Quran is a unique fusion of poetry and prose. Likewise, we have Professor Bruce Lawrence from Duke University in his book, The Quran, a Biography. On page number 8, he says, Quranic verses as tangible signs are expressive of an inexhaustible truth. They signify meaning, using meaning, light upon light, miracle after miracle. We have Professor Martin Zabin from the Netherlands. He says the Quran, notwithstanding the pre-Islamic poems, is the most eminent written manifestation of the Arabic language. Professor Anthony Jones talks about the 12th chapter of the Quran, talks about the imagery in Surah Al-Yusuf. We know Professor Neil Robinson in his book, Discovering the Quran, a Contemporary Approach to a Veiled Text. He has a whole chapter called The Dynamic Style of the Quran, and he talks about iltifat, which in Arabic balagha means moving your direction from one place to the other, moving your face from one place to the other. And he says the Quran has an amazing dynamic style. An example of this is in the shortest chapter of the Quran, Al-Kawthar. Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْهَرْ, until the end of the surah. Allah says, verily we have given you the abundance, therefore pray to your Rabb, your Lord, and sacrifice. Look at the shift in personal pronoun. We, then the Rabb. Think about this. Verily we have given you abundance, therefore pray to your Rabb and sacrifice. There is a shift between we to your Rabb. Why? It's all to enhance the effect of the message, the communication. Because the first verse, Ikhwan and Akhawat, involves majesty, power, ability. We have given you the abundance. So we is the majestic plural, the power of majesty, showing that there is something that we're able to do. But in the second verse, it's about intimacy and spirituality. As Allah says, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْهَرْ. Therefore, pray to your Lord and sacrifice. The shifts in the Quran are all in line with the meaning. This is what you call the dynamic style of the Quran, which in Arabic balagha is called iltifat. So the Quran came to challenge the best people, and these people failed. So the Quran is the timeless challenge. It's the third aspect of its timelessness. The fourth aspect, Ikhwan and Akhawat, is how it changes society, which we all have a responsibility to convey. Take Britain as an example. We have 167 rapes every day according to Amnesty International UK. That's approximately 90,000 rapes a year in this country. According to the feminist philosopher Diane E. Russell, she wrote in the Oxford publication, she wrote that 66% of all convicted rapists, they incited pornography as a reason to why they raped women. 66% in this liberal society, from its so-called absolute freedoms, it allows the individual freedom of watching pornography. But there is a direct correlation between pornography and rape, even by feminist philosophers and sociologists like Diana E. Russell. This is why American college students, 35% of them, said they would rape a woman if they could get away with it. Almost 66% of 7 to 17-year-olds, they cite that they have to look good to feel wholesome about themselves. There's 80,000 prostitutes in this country, and some people that say conservative estimate. Take child abuse as an example. 7% of all children are victims of child abuse, according to NSPCC research. We have social fragmentation and decay. According to the Children's Society report published in February 2009, it says that British and American children have more relative poverty, instability, they're affected by drugs and alcohol. And they cite individualism for the problem. And individualism is the basis for capitalist liberalism. If you study Western political theory, atomism or individualism is the basis, the foundation, it's the aqidah of liberalism. It rests on the notion of individualism, that we have to take the individual and remove him away from society. This is why even when you look at human rights, the so-called human rights of the UN Charter, they're very individualistic based. So this individualism from a political, social context has destroyed our society. There's even David Cameron, or according to many of you, Dawood Kamran, said, broken Britain. This is why Justice Coleridge, a judge, a family judge, he said that we live in a never-ending carnival of human distress and misery as a result of this individualism, which is a result of liberalism and capitalism. And Islam came to change this, because Islam doesn't have an individualistic outlook on man. Read the Quran. Read what it says. It talks about this collective. It talks about that the individual is not an abstract entity divorced of human attachments. He has social obligations. The Quran mentions this. Take the hadith in Bukhari for instance. When the Prophet ﷺ, he summarized and described the people who protect the rights of Allah. He talked about a boat. There is an upper deck and a lower deck. The upper deck is giving fresh water to the lower deck, but they stop giving fresh water. So the lower deck, they become individualistic and they make a hole in the bottom. What happens to the ship, ikhwan and akhawat? It sinks. It sinks, people. And this hadith gives amazing teaching in regards to our view of social theory, politics, because it shows that there is a relationship between individuals and society, society and individuals. So it came here, the Quran and Sunnah came to break individualism, to talk about compassion, to talk about feeding the poor, family, friends, the destitute, freeing the slave, dealing with the orphans, thinking that you're lower than others, you treat others better than you treat yourself. All teachers of the Quran and Sunnah. For instance, the Sunnah says, believe in Allah, feed the poor and spread the salam. 66% of this tradition is a social phenomenon. Spreading the salam and feeding the poor. So Islam came to deal with these social ills by going straight to the root and dealing with the issue of individualism. There are various hadith. For example, al-mu'minu mirat al-mu'min. The mu'min, the believer, is a mirror of another believer. Again, showing the relation between the individual and the rest of society. The ummah is like one body. This is the reality of the Quran and Sunnah, to deal with individualism. So ikhwan and akhawat, we see the Quran is timeless from this perspective. The Quran came to change things. But are you just going to sit here and listen to a talk that tells you that the Quran changed Western political theory? That influenced people who wrote treatises on justice and tolerance? Are you just going to sit here to listen to the fact that the prophetic traditions in the Quran influenced King Louis IX that established the presumption of innocence? Are you just going to sit here just to believe that the Quran, when implemented in Islamic Spain, facilitate the Islamic Renaissance and the scientific revolution, and facilitate the institutions like Oxford University? Are you just going to sit here and listen to that and do nothing? Are you going to sit here and listen to the sacrifice of the Sahaba, how they were timelessly inspired to change the world? Are you going to sit here to see that the Quran is a linguistic, inimitable miracle, that it timelessly challenged the whole of mankind to produce something like it? Are you just going to sit here and realize the effect of Tawheed that came from the Quran on the hearts of humans? Or are you just going to sit here and listen to the fact that the Quran changed the world? You're just going to listen and that's it, and not do anything? Are you just going to listen to the fact that the Muslims were the ones, as a result of implementing the Quran and Sunnah, change history forever? They preserved the Jewish community. As an ex-Zionist journalist called Yuri Avnery once wrote, that every honest Jew must thank Islam and the Muslims for their survival. This is why you have the works of Philip Mansour in his book Constantinople. He cites a primary source, a letter from a rabbi, written in 1453. This rabbi invites the Jews to the lands of the Muslims, the Turks. Come to the land of the Turks. Rich are the fruits of the earth, we're not oppressed with heavy taxes, we live in peace and freedom. We also had the Jewish historian Heinrich Graetz, the 19th century Jewish historian. What did he say? He said the Jews lived favorably under the Mohammedans. We had the monk Bernard the Wise. He traveled to Baghdad, I believe, and he wrote a letter saying that if you left your belongings somewhere and you left them for a few days and you come after a few days, they will still be there for you to collect them. Such was Islam because of its people, inspired by the Quran and the Sunnah. What about the Jewish historian Amnon Cohen, who wrote a 2-volume book, A World Within? He collected 1,000 records of the judiciary under Islam. And he said, although the Jews had the liberty and freedom to go to the rabbis, the majority of them chose to go to the Qadi, the Islamic judge. They knew Islam had justice. The Qadi had justice. Because what he implemented, which was the Quran and Sunnah, was based on justice. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يرجمنكم شنآن قوم لعل تعدلوا. Oh, you believe, be steadfast witnesses in justice, and don't let the hatred of others make you swerve from justice. Be just. The Quran says, أتقوا ظلما فإن الظلم ظلمات يوم القيامة. The Prophet said, you can find this hadith in Riyadh al-Salihin. Be conscious, be aware of oppression and injustice, for it's going to be darkness on the Day of Judgment. And this is why we had in history even the Jews saying amazing things about the Muslims. What about the professor from Columbia University in his book, The Case for the Islamo-Christian Civilization? He said justice was implemented impartially, irrespective of religion, gender and status. So you're going to listen to these amazing things and sit put and do nothing. When Allah tells you, as we said at the beginning, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِلرُّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. O you who believe, respond to the call of Allah and His Messenger, to that which gives you life. This is the action for today. Arise and warn the wider societies that are running towards Jahannam. Save them from this. Be worried like the Prophet was worried. Be anxious like he was worried. As the Quran says about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you're almost going to kill yourself from frustration and anxiety that they're not listening to you. So call people to this. You don't need the ijazah from any scholar, any mufti, any mulana. How dare they even say you need an ijazah for da'wah? They're not a real scholar then, wallahi. Because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith, convey from me, even if it's one ayah. He gave you ijazah 1400 years ago. Many of you know Surah Fatiha and more. So you're at least 7 times qualified to give da'wah. There's no excuse. And it defines who you are, ikhwan and akhawat. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that can be found in the Arba'in of An-Nawawi, the 40 hadith of An-Nawawi, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. You won't truly believe unless you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And this brotherhood is not Islamic brotherhood, it's insaniyah. It's humanity, as An-Nawawi said in his explanation. And we have the compendium of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. I believe he was a student of Ibn Taymiyyah. He wrote in his compendium, talking about this hadith, that this means human people, it means people in general. So what is this hadith saying to us? This hadith is saying, لا يؤمن. You won't truly believe, you won't be a mu'min. You're spending qiyam al-layl in Ramadan, raising your hands in dua, to be closer to Allah, to be a mu'min, not just a Muslim. But the Prophet is saying, you're never going to be a mu'min unless you love for others what you love for yourself. So what do you love the most? Allah and His Messenger is an aqeedah matter. You love the Quran and Sunnah more. So the Prophet is saying, if you want to be a mu'min, then give what you love to others. So if you love Allah and His Messenger, what do you have to give to the wider society? Tell me. Da'wah. You have to give them da'wah now. Don't be like the people of the Sabbath. We have this story in the Quran. There were 3 types of people when Allah Azza wa Jalla commanded they don't fish on the day of the Sabbath. One, people disobeyed Allah, they were made into monkeys and pigs, they were destroyed. The second people, they obeyed Allah, but they never gave the da'wah, they never command the ma'ruf and forbid the munkar. And Allah kept silent on them, according to Ibn Kathir, which is the strongest opinion. The third group, not only did they obey Allah, but they told the first group to fear Allah. And Allah praised them. So my question is, do you want Allah to be silent on you, or do you want Him to praise you? The one worthy of all praise, He's praising you. If you give da'wah and you command the ma'ruf and you obey Allah. Case closed. Please promise to yourselves in this month of Ramadan that you engage in the da'wah, ikhwan and akhawat. I'll end it there. We've spoken a lot about history, about the timelessness of the Quran, about da'wah, about tawheed, about the renaissance, about scientific revolution, about justice, about the presumption of innocence, about the linguistic miracle of the Quran. We spoke about many things. But let's open it out to Q&A in the last few minutes we have. Oh, of course, this is a big topic, Akhi. And there's a lot of talk in a nutshell. Like a bar nut, yeah? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. But we know that we have to emulate the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says in the Quran that in the Prophet there is the best example. And we know according to the hadith narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a walking Quran. So let's take some features of the Quran to our personality. Let me take 2 that we deny all the time. Forgiveness, rahmah. Wallahi, in our community we forget this sometimes. In our community we have brothers and sisters who don't speak to each other for months. We have family feuds, especially in the Bengali community and the Pakistani community. I know. I've entered those communities from a Greek background. And I'm Pakistani but I'm Greek. I converted to Islam nearly 9 years ago. So the point is, I've entered your communities and I've seen not nothing, but some things that are very disgraceful. Individualism, what's in it for me? Lack of mercy or rahmah, judgmental attitude, lack of forgiveness, lack of love. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you love someone, tell them. Some of you have never heard that word from your fathers. I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up. But I know, wallahi, some of your dads, you've never heard it from your father, the word love. It's a neglected practice. Ibn al-Qayyim said, when you see rahmah, you should see Islam. And this is why we grow up, especially as Asians, with inferiority complex, lack of self-esteem. Because we haven't had these instilled values, Islam has become a shell. Who's heard of Alam Shah? Alam Shah is an apostate. He wrote a book called the Young Atheist Handbook, just come out, and I've read it. And I've read some of it, and I feel sorry for him. I empathize with him. He was brought up in an environment that his dad had no compassion with him. Islam was his do's and don'ts, beards and those. Wallahi, even goats have beards. Doesn't make you special. It makes you special because you're obeying Allah and obeying the Prophet. Not because there's dead protein on your face. I have a hijab now, I'm pious. No, you're not. Even slugs cover themselves. They're called snails. It means you're pious? This is no. You're doing it because of the obedience. Taqwa is reaching Allah, not the cloth itself. We've messed up Islam. It's become very rabbinical. Don't get me wrong, we have our fiqh. But there are reasons. Why do we do the fajr? Because of obedience to Allah. Because we love Allah. We want to obey Allah. We want to fulfill our purpose in life. That spirit has been neglected. This is why Islam is form and spirit from that perspective. And we bring both together. This is why you have some sisters that have more haya than sisters with niqab. Sisters with no hijab have more haya in the body language. You see some sisters that say sometimes, yeah, bruv. Yeah, no hijab, right, bruv. We have some sisters with no hijab. And they're like very humble, they have amazing haya. They're both right and both wrong. One is right the way they look, one is right the way they are. They both have to be together. I know brothers, clean shaven like butts, but naked shaven. They have more piety than we have. They forgive, they give sadaqah, they charity, they do qiyamul layl. I've seen this for myself, ikhwan. But some of our brothers, when they wear beards up to their ankles, ankle warmers. Don't get me wrong, it's good to have a beard, very long beard, it's a sunnah, it's an obligation, okay? But the point I'm trying to say is this. We've become people of we've become an outward shell. What about the message of the Quran? In the 91st chapter of the Quran, Allah says, be of those who are compassionate, forgive and overlook. Furqan, the chapter of the differentiator. What does Allah say? Chapter 25, I believe. The servants of the merciful are what? When the foolish address them, say salam. They forgive. They pray at night. So this forgiveness and this tolerance, this love is so important we neglect it. In developmental psychology, I did psychology at university, you see if you don't give love, you're going to get the apostasies of the children. What do you expect? Our elders, what do they expect? They complain. I get parents complaining to me, my son's an apostate. Well, what have you done? What did you do? Islam was do and don't. Islam was get hungry in Ramadan and get sweaty by wearing hijab. That was it. So you're hungry and sweaty as a Muslim. That's all you have. That's all you feel. Because we don't have that rahmah. Wallahi, what does Allah say about the Prophet ﷺ? What does he say? If you were harsh to them, they would not listen to this message. So what does it say about da'wah and giving the message of Islam? That compassion and mercy is the mechanism to affect change. Is the mechanism to deliver Islam to people. Zamakhshari says about this hadith, about this ayah in the Quran, that it's about the niceness, kindness, love. Allah is saying they wouldn't have listened to you if you were otherwise. So who are we? So ikhwan, if you have parents, sisters, ikhwan, if you have children, akhawat, if you have children, say to them you love them. The power of the word. Act lovingly and say things lovingly. You build the self-esteem. Wallahi, we have a lot of brothers. I came from a kafir background. My dad is almost a mushrik. He believes God's inside him. Allah guided him. He's an amazing man though. I came from this environment, and then I came into the Muslim community, and I'm like, oh my God, we lack self-esteem. My dad taught me self-esteem. He told me I could move mountains. You're on the age of 7, he said you can achieve what you can. Be brave and bold, don't have an inferiority complex. As a kafir, when we have Islam, we have the solution, we have everything that is required, but we don't use it. That's the failure of the Muslim. That we don't use what we've been given by Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah knows us better than we know ourselves. So, ahi, love, rahmah, forgiveness. Forgive, ikhwan, learn to forgive. We're so quick to hate. It makes us feel better. The guy didn't pay back to us, I'm going to have one over him for the rest of my life, even the day of judgment. You know the scholars of Tazkiyah, you know what they say? If someone has asked everything for forgiveness, on the day of judgment you have no right over them. Allah may punish you for your arrogance for not forgiving. So be careful. Don't think it's all about my rights on the day of judgment. That's rubbish. The Prophet ﷺ, he never asked for his rights. Never. Always gave other people their rights. So forgive easily, ikhwan and akhawat. Wallahi, my father, yeah? He could have been very rich. He's a poor working class man. My grandfather had a lot of land and shops for him. But my dad gave it away and allowed his brother to take and steal it all. For the sake of unity in the family. It was my dad's right. And my dad was poor. Sometimes in Hackney, I used to go to the chemist with coppers to get my mum's sanitary towels. That was my father. He's a kafir. He learned to forgive his brother. Many of us, who knows the story in the family where brothers are feuding because of money? Or families are feuding? Everybody, don't lie. Everybody, almost everyone. My dad's a kafir and he implements these amazing principles of, you want the dunya, take it. You know how powerful forgiveness is? It's so easy to hate. Especially your brothers. Forgiveness is so powerful. It takes a brave man to forgive. Don't you want Allah to forgive you? SubhanAllah. You know, one of the Salaf came to one of the pious predecessors and said, why don't you talk about people? He said, because I'm not satisfied with my own self. He's not satisfied with his own self. Why is he going to start, hating others and not forgiving others? Forgive people. Let's spread the love, ikhwan. Be merciful. Be tolerant. Look at the lives of the Sahaba. Umar ibn al-Khattab punched the Sahabi. I believe it was Abu Hurairah. Punched him, bang, made him cry. And then complained to the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't say, oh, look, you must be haram, akhi. Do tawbah. Because technically it wasn't the right thing to do, was it? He didn't say, oh, this, that, the other. They were brothers. If you read the stories of Sahaba, the things that we do, Abu Bakr and I forgot the other Sahabi when they were arguing over something, over a date tree. And Abu Bakr demanded him to say something to him back because he did something a little bit wrong. And they ran to the Prophet ﷺ. Human relationships, but they forgave so quickly. And each had their own character. And they were tolerant with it. They knew Umar was a bit harsh. Others were a bit soft. And they knew this is character overlooked. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when they were in the battle of Yarmouk, Abu Bakr told the Sahaba, don't overlook the faults of the other Muslims who never met the Prophet because their tarbiyah was a bit dodgy, it was a bit rough Arabs, yeah? Overlook their faults because their cause is high, it's da'wah. To the point, overlook the faults even as long as it doesn't require hudud. So it could be very bad sin still. Overlook the faults because they've got a higher cause. And this is how we bring unity and forgiveness amongst the brothers. And let me tell you something, when you don't forgive, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. You want one over someone. You have an ego. You have an ego problem. And that's a big problem in our Muslim communities, is egotistical attitude. I think we could talk about this to the cows come home. But I would argue is rahmah, love, compassion, tolerance amongst the Muslim community to get things right. And once you do this, things will follow through. Then we'll be people of sadaqah, then we're going to engage the wider society even better. And show that we have beacons of light, our families are loving and compassionate, and we overlook. Inshallah, may Allah make us of those. How do you give da'wah to colleagues at work where talking about religion is controversial? I don't know. It depends what you mean by controversial. Is it forbidden to talk about religion at work? Or is it just a taboo? If it's a taboo, then you can break that easily by showing certainty. Wallahi, ikhwana khawat, listen to this, yeah? Passion breeds passion. Certainty breeds certainty. Confidence breeds confidence. So if you are confident with your deen and it's part of who you are, then it will come out across that way. Trust me. Do it. Be, do, and you become. Be that person. If you go into the office and they say, aren't you hot with that, love? Say, nah, I'm not hot at all. Actually, I feel quite liberated. Because I'm not doing things because Vogue magazine told me to do it. Or because of the celebrity culture told me to do it. Or because my father told me to do it. Or because of my husband. Or because I own a boyfriend. I'm doing it because I'm enslaved to Allah. And it frees me from social pressure. And it frees me from my desires. Unfortunately, conceptually, you're a slave. You say you're free. Freedom, innit? Yeah? Free? High heels, are you free? Wallahi, when I was at work, I used to custom women with high heels. Are you really comfortable at your feet? I'm manky. They're messed up, mash up. So you're free? You tell me you're comfortable now? Oh, it makes me feel better. Why? Because people like it. Oh, so you're a slave to other people's expectations. But a Muslimah is the most freest woman on the planet. Because she's not enslaved to her desires and ego. She's not a slave to society and social pressure. She's enslaved to Allah. This is why Ibn al-Qayyim, he said that true freedom, liberty comes from enslavement to Allah, ubudiyya, servanthood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine you said that. You're like, whoa. It would make them think. And you say, if you don't believe in Allah, I can show it to you. If you don't believe in the Quran that frees me from this, I can prove the Quran to you. Here, have a read, and let me talk to you about its linguistic miracle. Because forget what it says sometimes. Because if it is true, whatever comes from truth is truth. So prove the basis. Prove Tawheed. Show that is the correct concept of Allah Azza wa Jal. So I would argue, confidence breeds confidence, passion breeds passion. Do that. And remember, any conversation is a da'wah conversation. You just have to practice. And the way to do that is by saying, even if it's a political thing, say, I don't know, say you're talking about the MP's expenses. It's all over the news. You're at work, they're complaining about it. Say, you know what, in my humble opinion, if we're more Islamic, this wouldn't be an issue. What do you mean, Islamic fundamentalism is rubbish, yeah? Well, if you have a minute, I could explain to you the concept of Islam, which make you understand what I'm talking about. You see, anything can be linked that way. And then give them the concept of Islam. Oneness of Allah, Allah exists, the Quran is from Allah, the Prophet was the Prophet. What comes from this truth is true. Khalas. Every conversation is a da'wah conversation. Even if you talk about stoning, the Independent, the other day was, a few months or years ago, there was a big spreadsheet on like the stoning in Iran. Look at you guys are barbaric. So no, we're not. If you understand why we do certain things, although we don't believe in its manifestation in this sense, because it's an unjust regime, because the hudud of Allah has to be implemented with justice and a judiciary. It's not jungle justice. But if you understand our way of life, you understand the concept of Islam. Do you have some time? I just want a yes or no answer, mate. How many days in the week, yes or no? You can't answer everything, yes or no? Do you believe in abortion, yes or no? Oh, well, it's far more complicated than that. Oh, so for your answers require nuanced discussion. Well, same with us. Let's have a conversation. You understand the concept of Islam, you will understand why these things are true and we believe in them. Do you have some time? And then bring them to Tawheed. How can you do da'wah to people when they get insulted and offended? Who get insulted? We get insulted? Or the people? I don't think the people get insulted. You mean I think they should talk about we get insulted and offended? Yeah, so what? So what? So what? I mean, come on, man. If you're gonna compromise your belief because someone else is sad because you're trying to take them away from hellfire, then you should be thinking yourself as a spiritual doctor. You know? You can't blame yourself for their sickness, yeah? So you're there and do it with compassion. Remember, you're going to get rejected. Wallahi, you've probably shed more blood and more tears for other than Allah. Here you're just going to get offended. You're not going to get hit in Britain usually. We probably got beaten up because of tribal feuds. Awami League versus BNP. Yeah? You know the politics of Bangladesh. Remember a few years ago, they were beating the crap out of each other. Men with beards and topies. Awami League and BNP were beating the crap out of each other. Wallahi on TV. For secular parties. For kufr. Kufr, man. Some kafir drew lines on a globe and we fight over those lines. Do you understand what that means, people? Kufr. There's no asabiyah in Islam. Some of us, especially in our Bengali communities, especially in East London, we believe that history started in 1971. That's when the world began. In the beginning, 1971. And on the Pakistani community, I was reading this book on the untold genocides. It's an academic book. And I told when I was in Pakistan for 2 weeks, doing a tour in the private universities, I told some people about the genocide of the Bengalis. Many, many women were getting raped. Many killed for as-sabiyah. They don't believe, they don't know the history. No, how could Pakistan do this? Pakistan Zindabad. Yeah? But it's all rubbish. It's all on both sides. I'm Greek, I'm allowed to say this, yeah? I'm married to a Bengali. You know that, yeah? Chittagong. So I'm married to Bengali, yeah? So, alhamdulillah, they took me on board like family, man. Wallahi, my mother-in-law, when I went to the first time in her house, may Allah preserve her, she said, she just loved me to bits because I was a convert to Islam. And I was so like gay then, man. I had tight jeans and tight tops and then clean shaven, long hair, curly hair, wavy hair. I was like, probably not even look Muslim. But they still love me to bits, you see. So the point is, that's a lesson. You know my mother-in-law? She had a black couple in her house for about 9 months. She got a 2-bedroom house, there was about 6 people in there. She took the black couple in her house. We can't even do that. We can't even take a Bengali in the house. If a Sylheti won't take a Chittagonian, have you been on Bangla TV? The argument, you just raised the issue between the Sylhetis and the South, khalas. You'll have thousands of calls. They're like this, they're like that, they're like this. Yeah? Asabiya, ikhwan and akhawat, it's a big problem, eh? I don't know how we talked about this now. How did we get to this? It's one of my chips on my shoulders, one of my rants. But anyway, how can we aspire like this to become... Yeah, I know, it's probably a Bengali system, mashallah. They do that with the terms, the phonetics, passionate about our religions, or our husbands who don't practice religion, they only work. Allahu Akbar. We chase the dunya. We chase the dunya. We're a cab driver, we own a restaurant, and we have a couple of houses or another one. Wallahi, if you chase the dunya, your mahar will be your akhirah. You get married to the dunya, your mahar will be your akhirah. You will give it away. My wife, do you know how much her mahar was? 101 pounds. Do you know where my wedding was? In her living room. Do you know where my wedding was? At her friend's house. Do you know how much money I spent? Hardly anything. I know Bengalis from working class backgrounds in this country, you have to save 25,000 pounds for a wedding, and then you get divorced. SubhanAllah, chasing the dunya, so important. Wedding, I swear, I know it, I've seen it. I was amongst Bengalis for years. And they'll complain, I've spent all my money. The brothers, they put the money, they put a collective pot every month, yeah? And that money goes to someone's wedding or something. 25k on a wedding. What is that? I'm not saying it's haram. I'm saying it's stupid. It's stupid. There's so much dunya, 25 grand, when you could have a nice simple wedding. Fine, give £1,000 mahar. Have £1,000 wedding. 25k? Some of these weddings in the East of the Mosque are 25k.
They're the cheap ones.
They're the cheap ones. And we strive for this, but we don't hardly strive for the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Imagine taking 1k and then 24k spending it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Giving it for da'wah. That will be the reward for life. Sisters, if your husband's workers, tell them you don't need the money. Explain to them, we don't need money. We don't need money. Just tell them. Use other examples. My wife, for example, she doesn't need anything. We were in a 2-bedroom house and 6 of us in there. 6 of us in there for years, about 5 years. Actually, that's not quite weird for you guys, is it? You know, in East London, there's about 100 of you. But the point I'm trying to say, doesn't expect anything. Don't expect much. Just expect a pious man, food, shelter, and clothing, khalas. Anything else is a bonus, wallahi. The kings at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were defined by having running water and honey on the table. We're kings! We are kings from that description. Wallahi, we're going to be accountable for everything that we spend. And we eat too much, ikhwan. Too much we eat. I'm telling you, if you didn't have meat on the table for 1 week in a Bengali or Pakistani household, there'll be a riot. Wouldn't there?
No.
That would be a riot. If you didn't have meat on the table, there'll be a riot. Yes or no?
Yeah, definitely.
There'll be a riot. You could divorce, talaq.
The rioters are here.
Honestly, one, we need to be careful as well. Even things like this, we need to be principled about this. Be conscious of it. We can't change overnight. But when it comes to the dunya, realize that Look, this is akhirah. Let me tell you what punishment is. Jahannam is this. You're on a desert island. It's very small. You have a bucket and a spoon. You're on a desert island, you have a bucket and a spoon. Any direction, any angle you look, on the horizon is this ocean. And you take your spoon, you dip into the ocean, you empty in your bucket. Then you have to wait 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, you get your spoon, you dip into the ocean, empty into your bucket. Then you wait another 1,000 years. Dip into the ocean, empty into the bucket. And by the way, it's always sunny. Are you ever going to fill the bucket? That's Jahannam, eternity. So are you going to work for something that's 60 years, 50 years? Or are you going to work for something that's eternal? What are you going to work for? That's just simple. What are you going to work for? And don't get me wrong, work for the dunya. Don't lose your portion, as Allah says. Yeah? But some of us, wallahi, we have houses here, a house in Bangladesh. We have 2 houses here. We have a shop. We're minicab drivers all. End week, we're on the dole. And we do some dodgy stuff with the government. Tax credits, this, that, the other. You know, wallahi, we have all the stuff. And we still want more. You know, that's why some people are so poor, all they have is money. Think about that. Some people are so poor, all they have is money. Are you that poor person? The Prophet said, true richness is not having wealth, is the richness of the soul. And true richness is not having wealth, is being content. That's why I always say a rich man is never happy. I know brothers. I know brothers myself who are close to millionaires. I was with him the other day, complaining that he works on Saturday until 1. This man could spend money on toys, car toys like this, just what he wants with it. And they're complaining. I had to remind him, bro, you could have been in the office getting £12,000 a year. This guy has money to throw sometimes. And he's depressed. Some other guy, he couldn't get his car, sports car. He was depressed. Although he had other cars, by the way. He couldn't get his toy, let's say, that he could drive once a month. He was depressed. My father, yeah, again, a kafir. The reason I'm mentioning him as a kafir, because if he could be like this, we should be better. He, for example, used to work in factories in clothing, yeah? He was bankrupt for years. He was homeless for 9 months. He hardly had any money. My dad doesn't own anything. He just owns something because my grandma passed away. He owns a little shack in the village in Greece. But literally he owns nothing. I have 0 inheritance. Not that you can inherit from Kufar anyway. Well, the difference of opinion, I think, but who cares? But the point is, I ain't getting nothing anyway. 0! But my dad lives like the richest man in the world. His heart, he wakes up in the morning, he's like, for him it's like he's pure, he hasn't hurt anyone. And he hasn't. He's not a slave to money. He doesn't worry about money. He lives like a rich man. I'm telling you, the way he eats, walks and talks, he's a rich man. You think he's a millionaire, billionaire. It's what about concept, where your heart lies. But other people, what are you chasing? You're chasing a mirage. You know what mirage is? Like fake water in a desert. When you go there, you're going to have a mouthful of sand. It's irrelevant. It is, honestly, it's wallahi, it's dunya itself has been described by the Prophet ﷺ as a rotten carcass of a goat. The word dunya comes from the term adna, which means something lowly and low. It also has a connotation of trying to grab some grapes you can't reach. It's always going to chase you. It's like trying to catch a shadow. That's the dunya. Food, shelter and clothing. Khalas. You know what? I'd rather these rich guys have other wives. Wallahi! That's more rewardable. Rather getting another house, get another wife. It's sunnah. You're preserving another family. So many single sisters in their 30s with like 5, 6 kids or whatever, they can't get married ever. Take her on board, be pious, take her on board. I would do that. I'm not ashamed. Would you do that, bro? I know your wife's not even.
She might be.
There's a famous saying from Bin Baz, rahimahullah. He said, Ayyum the khaifeen. The khaifeen are the cowards, yeah? The ones who are scared. Because, you know, it's like a joke, in a way, of the explanation of the Quran. Allah says, and you can only do one. So just stick to one. You go the cowards, yeah? This is a joke. But the point is,
I am.
no, you're not a coward, you're not a coward, you're not a coward.
I am, yeah.
Not a coward, it's just maybe your wife is braver than you. So the point is, if you give this as an example, because we should just use our money to implement Islamic social solutions. Sadaqah, zakah, getting another wife, publicly of course, not the hidden ones, yeah? And saying, look, I'm taking care of someone. Wallah, it is amazing, why not? This is Sharia from Allah, why are we scared? Purify your tawheed. We're people of tawheed, we're very strong with tawheed, yeah? But yet we're scared of the injunctions of Allah Azza wa Jal. We give them some kind of Western liberal stance. Oh, you're never going to be just, so it's not needed, it's not a solution anymore, forget it. Yeah? Purify your tawheed, Allah has given it to us. That's an example. But there's other things. Use your money for Islamic stuff. SubhanAllah, imagine, yeah? The other house you have, sell it. Say it's £250,000. You gave that to the Islamic Education Research Academy. Or you give it to Ibrahim College.
Very bad.
Every Muslim, say they bring one Muslim to Islam. 2 Muslims, Abdul Rahim Green has like 2,000 shahadas, do you know that? 2,000 shahadas. An Egyptian man gave him a Quran, just read it. If he had ikhlas in giving him the Quran, on the day of judgment this man is going to be seeing prayers he never prayed. Hajj he never did. Umrah he never performed. Dhikr he never pronounced. Reading the Quran he never read. Sadaqah he never gave. Thousands of these. This wasn't me, Ya Allah, but you gave someone a Quran that facilitated 2,000 shahadas. This is the real pyramid scheme. It doesn't work in the dunya, but it works in the akhirah. The business pyramid scheme, in Britain, yeah? So the point is, even one shahada is better than the best type of camels, which is the best type of wealth according to the Prophet ﷺ. Is his words, wahi, revelation, yes or no? Are they truth? Yes, they are. So you're chasing the dunya, but there's something better, the da'wah, facilitating it. One Muslim, better than all types of wealth, the best type of wealth. One Muslim, he gets married, there's 2 Muslims. They have kids, there's 4 Muslims. Those kids get married, 6 Muslims. They have 2 kids each, that's 10 Muslims. Within a generation, there's 10 Muslims doing deeds that come to you. Sadaqah, Hajj, prayer. Now imagine to the day of judgment. Imagine, you'll be seeing things on your mizan that you never did. Just because you called someone, or you facilitated it with your sadaqah and your money. So think bigger than that. Have a vision, ikhwan akhawat. Ikhwan akhawat, if I said anything wrong, has come from my nafs and my qareen, because shaitan is closed now, so my own shaitan. So,
You pointed to me.
so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and love you. May He guide you this month of Ramadan. Make the most of this. Please make dua for Sham, for Burma. Make dua for the Muslims around the world and the non-Muslims to be guided. Make dua for my parents, for them to be guided to Islam. Make dua for Ibrahim College doing an amazing work with all these students that they have. Make dua for your teachers, that they're blessed. And make dua that Allah gives us all sincerity. That we're not the people who we call people to Islam, but yet we get punished on the hellfire. We'll be walking around in circles with our guts hanging out. As per the hadith of the one who tried to call people to good but never implemented themselves. So I want to make this point that whatever I've said today, I don't necessarily implement myself, but I aspire to implement. Because I don't want Allah to use my words against me, that I'm going to be the one that called people to good and never implemented it. Because I'm saying, I'm not a perfect guy in any shape or form. This is my aspiration. So let's work together as a community to elevate each other, inshallah. I love you for the sake of Allah.